sir.
It's my pleasure to have you. I'm glad we have an hour. There's a whole lot to sort of unpack here. I think I want to start with this, so the audience and I are on the same page here. Tell me about the Institute and what you do every day, and then I'll jump from there.
The Institute is centered at a university, the New School in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, we're interested in paradigm change. We're interested in a political economy that lifts up the values of economic inclusion, civic engagement, and social equity for all people, with an understanding that class reductionist is limited and doesn't get the fact that even within class domains, we stratify along race, along gender, and various identity groups. So we are committed to this notion that a well-functioning economy is one where people have the resources they need to be self-determining in righteous ways. We center on a notion of just this, centering people in the environments in which we live as the objective of what we should be doing uh, in terms of our public investment to live tranquil, peaceful, and harmonious lives. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't think this is pie in the sky. We think in this land with great resources, with all the power that government can yield, that if directed with intentionality
Mm-hmm.
and with a strong moral code, we actually can achieve this type of society.
Used the word paradigm a moment ago, and I want to come back to that. Put a pin in that for the moment. To my mind, the paradigm has already shifted. We are in a new frame now. So the paradigm in Trump 2.0 has already shifted. The question to me is how we build a new construct. Again, if the paradigm has already shifted, how do we build a new construct? Put a pin in that. I'll come back to that question, I promise you, a little bit later in this conversation. Before I get to that, though, and I like how Darrick set me up for that. Before I get to that, though, I do want to ask, when you look back at the campaign of Donald Trump, I asked at the outset of this conversation whether or not Donald Trump's plan for Black America all along was just a bait and switch move. When you look back to that campaign, you'll recall that Donald Trump was campaigning for black votes. No matter what you think of his appearance at the NABJ in Chicago, he did go to Chicago. All throughout the campaign, he was campaigning for black men. A number of black men, rappers included, endorsed and supported Donald Trump. Many showed up and performed at the inauguration. You know the names, I ain't got to call them. But he made a play for black men. At one point, there was a real contestation for the votes of black men in particular. Kamala Harris was campaigning for them. She had a special plan for black men. Donald Trump campaigned for black male votes. If it was just a bait and switch in with hindsight in the rearview mirror, then what was that all about? What was that moment about where they both acted like they really cared about and were campaigning for the votes of black people and black men in particular? If it was just a bait and switch, what was that all about?
It is a tried and tested strategy that Trump uses on various groups. It's a politic of division. I mean, often his narrative to black people was one of, you're going to lose these black jobs because these immigrants are coming to take your job. So he appealed to a nativism,
Mm-hmm.
a nativistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
And he likes to invoke chaos in his approach, voter suppression in his approach, because on the one hand, where he's promoting policies that would lead to voter suppression, on the other hand, he's talking about another party that has never lived up to its promises. And he's not necessarily wrong in that. But again, his strategy was not the uplift of black people, but rather a political strategy in order to, I guess, stifle enough votes,
Mm-hmm.
create enough chaos, maybe siphon some with a purpose of winning a general election. But the tenor and tone of his campaign was, I think, hard to dispute, not grounded in white supremacy,
Mm-hmm.
grounded in a particular type of dog whistle signaling to certain classes of individuals that he was their president. I
So,
mean, literally the words "Make America Great Again," and more recently, he's
mm-hmm.
referenced the period that he talks that he's referenced that he desires to elicit with his notion of "Make America Great Again,"
Mm-hmm.
and that period was uh, right after slavery. I think it's from 1870 to about 1910. We know what the conditions were for Black people in that time. If we're going to talk about returning to that period,
Yeah.
so at the
So
risk of not being too long-winded, let me just sum up and say, of course, he had no intentions of delivering on a infrastructure to improve the conditions of Black Americans in particular. But from a political perspective, it was a strategic use in order so he could better himself to win the election.
so it was bait and switch is your point.
Yeah, thank you. That was
No.
to sum it up. It was bait and switch.
No.
Or another word we
Yeah.
could use,
Yeah.
Tavis, is grifting.
Yeah, I like that. I like grifting. I'll take either bait and switch or grifting. Just getting started with Darrick Hamilton, director of the Institute for the Study of Race, Stratification, and Political Economy at the New School. You're listening to him right now on Tavis Smiley.
Generous listening.
Charitable listening.
It's why everybody wants to talk to Tavis. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Robinhood Gold members can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on annual retirement contributions. With Robinhood Gold, the perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive a 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC.
Make a move into a home of your own. With City National Bank's Ladder Up Home Loan Grant, you could receive up to $20,000 that you never need to pay back. Use it toward your down payment, save on closing costs, or to buy down your mortgage rate. Find out more at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Property must be in a qualifying market in California, New York, or New Jersey. Additional terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Terms are subject to change without notice. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS number 536994.
At Exquisite Family Mortuary, we know how overwhelming it can be planning a meaningful farewell for your loved one. Secure your peace of mind by calling Charlotte White at 323-577-5562. That's Charlotte White at 323-577-5562. From traditional funeral services to memorials to direct cremation, pre-needs, and more. Call Charlotte White at Exquisite Family Mortuary for Southern hospitality in Southern California. That's Charlotte White at 323-577-5562. Exquisite Family Mortuary is located nearby in Inglewood, California. Exquisite Family Mortuary, where your loved one becomes our loved one.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. Every girl deserves a chance to shine. That's the belief behind Forgiving for Living, Inc. Since 1999, this organization has been empowering at-risk girls ages 13 to 18, helping them overcome behavioral and mental health challenges. Founder Wendy Gladney's personal journey inspired the mission to give girls hope and purpose through the power of forgiveness. Through their ambassador program, workshops, and annual conference, Forgiving for Living has touched over 3,000 young lives, providing mentoring, life skills, training, and tools for building self-esteem and confidence. You can make a difference. Visit forgivingforliving.org to donate, volunteer, become a mentor, or find help for a young girl in need. Forgiving for Living, Inc., building brighter futures for young girls. Visit forgivingforliving.org today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Sometimes he fails at fitting in.
But we're okay with that.
You're inside the Tavis Smiley Show.
You are indeed with Darrick Hamilton, director of the Institute for the Study of Race, Stratification, and Political Economy at the New School. You said a couple of things earlier, Darrick, I want to just go back to before we push forward here. You made reference to Donald Trump making reference, or certainly alluding to that period of American history just after the Civil War, that he'd like to return to, or at least that period of American history that he has in mind when he uses that phrase repeatedly, make America great again. In that regard, I wonder, in terms of strategy, whether it might be wise for Trump critics, those of us who want to hold him accountable, to connect this administration to the darkest parts of American history. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it makes complete sense. And it is kind of silly because it was not necessarily the heyday, even in terms of American productivity, the times he referenced. And it preceded one of the deepest, darkest recessions that we had.
Yeah. I'm thinking that by tying him to that particular era, I mean, here's my point. If he wants to make reference to that area, that era of history, why don't we tie him to that and remind the nation of what was actually happening during that period strategically?
You know, I hear you, but I don't think he's hiding from it. I think the clear message that he's trying to send to a certain demographic of American voters is a white supremacist era. And the era that he referenced, that is indeed an era in American history of white supremacy.
Yep.
So he's doing exactly what he wants to do. What we might want to do with our messaging is also point out that his purpose in alluding to a period of white supremacy is the capability of being able to exert power at the top, both economic and political power. So ultimately, what he is offering a certain demographic in America shouldn't be worth it to them. It shouldn't be worth it to them, you know, at the outset from a value standpoint, from a simple moral standpoint of having some moral fortitude, but also from their positioning. I mean, he's offering them relative position, but not absolute position. In terms of an absolute stratification, it's a period in which we had high concentrations of both wealth and political power. And so that, to me, doesn't seem like a grand bargain. Relative status over Black people, relative status over immigrants, in exchange for the preponderance of American resources being consolidated at the top. And you know, here you made this reference earlier too, Tavis, to paradigm change. Absolutely, we need paradigm change, not the paradigm change of Donald Trump,
Right.
but paradigm change that does not leave us vulnerable to the great inequality where people get lured to divisive fascist tendencies towards honing in on their relative group identity vis-a-vis somebody else.
Yep. As I said earlier, I believe the paradigm has already shifted. The question for me is how we build a new construct. We started this program today in conversation with Ken Martin, the new chair of the Democratic Party, and then we followed that conversation with Jesse Jackson Jr., who spent almost 20 years in Congress, and so we did politics in the entire first hour today. Let me circle back to that conversation with Ken Martin in particular, again, the relatively new chair of the DNC. There are some Democratic Party strategists, as you know, who have concluded that Kamala Harris lost in November largely because she was perceived by voters as too left-leaning. That's one way to read it. The other way to read it is that the Democratic Party can ill afford at this moment to ignore the issues of race and gender identity and other fraught issues. I don't know that they gain anything by ignoring those issues. What say you?
They never can be ignored. You know, the dog whistle is that they're always there. If you don't talk about them, all that does is limit your power and your ability to address it. But they're always there. They're always present. So there's no such thing as ignoring it.
Yeah. My sense is, and Ken Martin and I got into a bit of this in our first conversation, and I want to go a bit more expressly there with you, and that is trying to figure out what the Democratic agenda is. And I'm not trying to make you overly partisan, but you'll take my point. Trying to figure out what the strategy of the opposition is. We can even drop the term Democrat per se, but the opposition. I'm not sure I see what the game plan is here. But my sense is that the resistance to this moment has to include lawsuits, boycotts, marches, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that I've seen a playbook yet as to how to successfully navigate through this moment, but that playbook must include a variety of things. What say you about what that variety ought to look like?
I mean, you named some of the things that need to be done with regards to resistance. A key antidote to authoritarian power is solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
and it can't be a fake solidarity. So your reference to the need to talk about race is vivid because a solidarity without uh, affirmative inclusion is inauthentic. And we've seen that play out in the past before. If it's simply grounded in class, that's not enough. It has never been enough, not only for black people, but for all Americans, because it leaves open the capability of fissure, of finding some divisive way in which you can pit one group against the other. But that said, you also made a clear point that I think is accurate, which is there needs to be some offense. There needs to be a vision. The one thing that Trump did do is offer vision.
Mm-hmm.
He did offer a clear vision, not one that I adhere to or admire or think is productive and useful. But what is lacking in terms of the opposition or the Democratic Party of how we want to label it is some clear articulation of a new vision forward. Now, I will give the Biden administration some credit for doing some things that hadn't been done before, that were somewhat unprecedented compared to our recent history, such as during the pandemic. And I won't have to go into a lot of details because we could stay on topic, but we should acknowledge that what we did in this pandemic was very different than the Great Recession, where we put a moratorium on eviction, moratorium on foreclosures. We sent money directly to the American people for productive purposes. The PPP loans, however problematic they were in their initial rollout, they essentially guaranteed employment for workers that were already employed and the firm had a payroll. So these things hadn't been done before in recent history. And to me, that would be part of a new vision that, again, invests in people, not just for charitable reasons or to keep their consumption up, but to enhance their self-determination and productivity. So now when we start talking about enhancing their productivity and self-determination, we're getting into vision. So we're getting into offering the American people a clear, articulated vision of what an economy should be and how we're going to achieve it. And, I'll just say broadly, invest in people in trust-based governance. So when we really provide the resources that people need, the necessary resources, and what are they? A home, a job, income, some capital, guaranteed health insurance, economic rights. That's what it is. And that term has become somewhat bastardized in America, but it shouldn't be. Inclusive economic rights is the North Star to fulfill a new economy that makes us less vulnerable to divisive politics, that makes us less vulnerable to fascism. And guess what else? It invests in people and enhances their productive capacities so that they can make the choices in their life that not only benefit them, but spill over to their communities and lead to productive macroeconomic multipliers. And then one other thing, it promotes tranquility. It promotes safe environments. It promotes healthy environments. It is a much more enlightened society than one that we had before Trump and Kamala Harris. That was pretty much the status quo, was this fictive notion that through laissez-faire and transactions, that's the most fair, efficient, colorblind mechanism of how to anchor an economy. What's missing in that narrative is notions of power itself, and that just through simple transaction, you ignore the fact that there are individuals with no resources or limited resources that don't get to play out their ingenuity and effort, but instead are vulnerable to the whims of somebody else's charity or the exploitation of somebody else's power. So this new type of vision that we're talking about is one that facilitates collective bargaining for workers, one that facilitates the state investing in its most treasured assets, which is its people. and also sustainable environments.
Mhm. I mentioned that we talked earlier in today's program to Ken Martin, the DNC chair, and Jesse Jackson Jr. And you are channeling Jesse Jackson Jr. right about now, talking about economic rights. Jesse's argument, which I'm still marinating on, is that what we ought to be organizing around right now are the rights that people are losing. If you figure out a way to organize around those issues, the rights that people are losing every single day, maybe you can find a way to re-energize the opposition to Mr. Trump. And so your comment about economic rights just took my mind right back to that conversation with Jesse about the rights that everyday people are losing in this country. Darrick Hamilton is not just the director of the Institute for the Study of Race, Stratification, and Political Economy at the New School. He also happens to be the chief economist for the AFL-CIO. Chief economist for the AFL-CIO. So I want to talk about the numbers. He's sort of pushing me in that direction anyway, so he ain't got to push too hard. I'm ready to go to talk about the actual numbers. Before I get into the numbers, I mentioned earlier in today's program that Donald Trump sat for an interview yesterday with Terry Moran of ABC News. We played a clip earlier from that conversation, but here's the clip I want to play now, and you'll see why it fits in rather nicely, I think, to this conversation. Give it to me, Miles.
Well, you said something a couple weeks ago that struck me. You said concerning the tariffs, which economists say are going to raise prices, you said, quote, hang tough. Yeah. It won't be easy. You said that to the American people. Is that what Americans should expect, some hard times?
I've said that during my campaign. Look, we won a campaign by a lot. We won all 7 swing states. We won the popular vote by a lot. You know, we had a tremendous campaign. I said all of these things during my campaign. I said, you're going to have a transition period. We've been ripped off by every country all over the world. They're laughing at us. They thought we were stupid people, and we were. And I said, that's not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen.
Hard times are ahead?
I don't think so. I think great times are ahead. Look, since I came in, gasoline is down, groceries are down, egg prices are down. Many things are down, just about everything. You know, you don't have the drop in fuel and energy and oil like we did. I took it from maybe $3.20, maybe more than that, down into a much lower number. When you have that kind of a drop, you're not going to have inflation.
Not now, but it's the tariffs, right? We still have 145% tariffs on China. Your Treasury Secretary said we basically have an embargo on China.
Look, you're trying to say something's going to happen, Terry.
No, okay, well,
nothing's going to happen.
You know business.
Terry,
I want to ask you.
I do know business.
Yes,
and
so 145% tariffs on China, and that is
that's good.
Basically
that's
an
good.
embargo.
They deserve it.
It'll raise prices on everything from electronics to clothing to building houses.
You don't know that. You don't know whether or not China's going to eat it.
That's mathematics.
China probably will eat those tariffs, but at 145, they basically can't do much business with the United States. And they were making from us $1 trillion a year. They were ripping us off like nobody's ever ripped us off. And by the way, we have other countries that were just as bad. If you look at the European Union, it was terrible what they've done to us. Every country, almost every country in the world was ripping us off. They're not doing that anymore.
I don't have time to run through the fact-checking that we've done about everything that Donald Trump just said about prices being down here, there, and everywhere. Not true. Let's just put it at that. Leave it there. But as I mentioned, Darrick Hamilton, our guest in this hour, is the chief economist for the AFL-CIO. So my broad question here is, and I've only got 90 seconds now for you to start. We'll continue with your answer when we come forward. Again, that's Donald Trump talking to Terry Moran of ABC News. When you look at the numbers, Mr. Chief Economist for the AFL-CIO, what do the numbers suggest to you? For real, for real.
I mean, the numbers suggest that we're heading towards a recession. And what's worse, a recession with rising prices, a double whammy. The blunt and ubiquitous use of tariffs is chaotic and inflationary. The strategic use of tariffs to sanction capital that uses a global atmosphere searching the lowest common denominator to exploit workers in some place hurts workers here and abroad. Well, that's a productive use of tariffs.
More with Darrick Hamilton when we come forward. There's a bit more about that clip I want to probe with him, and a great deal more I want to cover as we continue our conversation right here on Tavis Smiley.
Why does Tavis say when we come forward?
Because he's not going back.
And you don't have to go back either. Forward ever, backward never. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward. Forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know with BIN News. Interest in becoming an NYPD officer surged 45% after eligibility requirements were loosened in February. Mayor Adams announced the NYPD is on track to reach 35,000 members by fall 2026. The U.S. is prosecuting migrants entering a new military zone at the southern border in New Mexico. The Department of Justice has charged at least 28 people with violations of security regulations for entering the zone. The U.S. economy shrank by 0.3% in Q1 2025 due to President Trump's global tariffs. Imports surged over 40% as companies rushed products before tariffs. And the NBA postseason continues. The Celtics advanced with a 120-89 win over the Magic. The Pistons avoided elimination, beating the Knicks 106-103, and the Nuggets lead the series 3-2 after defeating the Clippers 131-115. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Every day, a child in poverty waits for a sponsor is another day of hopelessness. There are thousands of kids who've been waiting over a year. End their wait. Sponsor a child with compassion today. Just text the word radio to 83393.
Is this the tackle? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Both of LA's NBA teams are facing elimination from the playoffs in their next game. The Lakers need to bring it tonight in Game 5 against Minnesota. The Timberwolves lead the best-of-7 series 3-1. If the Lakers lose, this will be the second straight year they have been eliminated in the first round. 7 p.m. tip-off on TNT. Shout out to Lakers star Luka Doncic. Doncic donated $5,000 to cover the entire cost of restoring a mural in downtown LA featuring Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi. The mural, designed on a building on the corner of 14th and Main Street, was vandalized over the weekend. As for the Clippers, they forgot to bring their defense to Denver, especially when it came to defending Jamal Murray. Murray lit up the Clippers with 43 points in a 131-115 win. Denver now has a 3-2 lead in the series. They can eliminate the Clippers in Game 6 Thursday night at the Intuit Dome in Inglewood. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
All I need is one mic.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. With so many shows on our station weekdays and weekends, it's hard for me to keep track of all the guests who are actually in studio on any given day. I wish I'd known in advance that LADA Nathan Hochman was coming in studio for a recent interview. Had I known, I would have loved to have personally greeted him and then asked him why LA City Council member Curran Price is being criminally prosecuted for allegations of misconduct similar to the conflict of interest violations for which former City Council member Kevin De Leon is only being fined. What's that about, Mr. DA? In fairness to Mr. Hochman, it was former DA George Gascon who actually filed felony charges against Councilman Price. I opined then on how these criminal charges against Price did not pass the smell test. I was concerned then that this was yet another wayward prosecution of a high-profile black elected, not to mention a waste of taxpayer money. I am even more convinced now that this is a hot mess. To be clear, Neither you or I want a bunch of self-serving, greedy, conflict of interest criminals managing the people's business inside LA City Hall. But we also don't want selective or targeted prosecution of black politicians. We've seen that movie before, and we don't need a sequel. It's hard to watch Kevin De Leon get away with paying an $18,000 fine for repeated ethics violations, what he calls an oversight, and at the same time, watch the DA's office continue its criminal prosecution of Kern Price for issues allegedly involving his wife's clients. Motions, I might add, that were passed unanimously by the LA City Councilman. What are you saying, Tavis? I'm glad you asked. DA Hochman did not start this inquisition, but he certainly has the power to stop it. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Fundamental fairness. In the absence of fundamental fairness, we experience a cascade of deteriorating conditions. The erosion of trust, the weakening of social cohesion, alienation, marginalization, the legitimacy of authority diminishes, cynicism and disengagement grow, and ultimately, people abandon civic participation altogether. Fundamental fairness, Mr. Hochman, that's all we ask. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. As always, we welcome your feedback.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know the United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time? Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
Freedom is an endless meeting. So let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Darrick Hamilton, who's director of the Institute for the Study of Race, Stratification, and Political Economy at the New School. He also happens to be the chief economist for the AFL-CIO. And before that break, I was asking him what he sees when he looks at the numbers. We played a clip of Donald Trump in his conversation yesterday with Terry Moran of ABC News talking about these tariffs and whether or not inflation is peeping around the corner. He denied that. Let me get back to that particular question and let you complete that first, Darrick, before I move forward. So what when you see these numbers, what do you see coming down the pike?
And, we should ground the numbers in the fact that he inherited an economy where prices were trending down and we had robust growth. Mm-hmm. So that context is useful. So where do I see it headed?
Yeah.
A big risk is the structural damage that he may do as well. We haven't talked a lot about the international sphere, but if we think about the tariffs and its impact, he's driving us into an isolationist position. He's driving us into a position that weakens the dollar. And, the debt, we often overplay the fears around the debt, mm-hmm. but it does become really fearful if the dollar becomes weak, if we lose our monetary sovereignty, our ability to finance things in a way that the dollar has strength. Those are structural risks that he's putting forth. Yep. And then, we're talking about economics. I'll just lay out one other thing. There's a lot of critiques we can lay at America and its imperialist approach in a global way. However, coming out of World War II, there was a good deal of goodwill that America did generate, and it did it perhaps in ways that did not extend to the whole world, but its approach in rebuilding some of the decimated countries coming out of World War II not only was good for that country and the tranquility to prevent World War III, it was good for America as well in terms of creating markets by which trade could occur in a productive way. Of course, I want to be clear, what was problematic is that it didn't extend to the global South, that the global South was very much involved in World War II as well, but there was no Marshall Plan type investments to promote those countries. But that said, if we fast forward to now where we are, the impact of what we're doing with regards to the antagonism on a global level is going to isolate America, is going to weaken our monetary power, both domestically and globally. And perhaps globally, that might be a good thing because we do some malfeasance with the dollar in a global context. But nonetheless, if I try to summarize, we are creating the potential for some structural damage that's going to make us hard to be able to recover from in the near future as well as the far future.
So let me ask you. I noted some days ago that a number of corporate CEOs, including the CEO of Walmart, who I know, and others, were in the White House meeting with the president to press their claim, to make their case about this tariff drama. And so he gave audience to these corporate CEOs. Unless I missed something, I have not seen a bunch of labor leaders invited to the Oval Office to have their say with the president. But given that you are the chief economist for the AFL-CIO, broadly speaking, that's just one labor union, but obviously there are a number that come under that umbrella. So broadly speaking, as chief economist for the AFL-CIO, how is labor responding to what Trump is doing, and how is labor bracing itself for what is to come? Or how ought they be bracing themselves for what is to come?
I mean, he certainly is a president hostile to labor. We need only look at the unjust, haphazard firing of all the public servants that's already taken place under a fictitious department, not a real department, labeled DOGE, that is, headed by the richest man in the world. In addition, he's canceled the collective bargaining contract of many of the remaining federal workers and limited their ability to collective bargain, again, with this fake notion, this grifting notion under the guise of national security. So it's a president that's hostile to labor. But to answer your question, the AFL-CIO is in part taken to the street. I know the president, Liz Schuler, she's out there speaking with various organizations, and then a lot of the local leaders, as well as leaders of particular unions, they are out there talking, speaking to their members and presenting alternative visions. And if you go to the AFL-CIO webpage, there's what's the word? I don't want to use the word shadow, but an alternative to DOGE that's presenting information as well as narratives that have labor interest in mind, not just this notion of trying to essentially destroy government, leading with workers first and foremost.
Speaking of workers and everyday people, I want to circle back to a point you made earlier. I've been getting all kind of comments from listeners in this hour, and I want to just pull this one out because I think it's a pretty good question, actually. I wish I thought about it myself. The listener says, Tavis, if we help folk live healthier lives, you were talking earlier about economic rights and the kind of vision we need for everyday people in this country. So here is that's what animates, I think, this question. Tavis, if we help folks live healthier lives, it means they will live longer lives. Can America afford it vis-a-vis the current Social Security system, making all those payments for all those extra years? Or should Social Security become means tested for those who need it and not folks who don't need it?
If we want to add a means test to Social Security, it would be to relax the phase out on those that are wealthy. So it wouldn't go a means test as to who qualifies. I think the fact that it has the aspect that both rich and poor people are included in Social Security is essentially like a dividend, almost a bond that your mere citizenship entitles you to a pension that the government will provide. There's some solidarity in that. But this question of affordability, for the first and foremost, we should look at distribution in America. When half of Americans own 1% of the nation's wealth, that in and of itself demonstrates an affordability question. And then here's another point that I just want to get out, which is if we conceive of these resources going towards Americans as investments, and they are indeed investments, the point is that not only does it provide security, it allows for innovation. It is grounded in some notion that when people are properly resourced, they generate productivity, they generate innovation. And so when we think about an economy that's growing in a dynamic way, that is the way in which I would articulate some of these types of investments. You know, when money goes towards corporations, we're unambiguous in talking about them as investments.
Mm-hmm.
But when money goes towards people, we conceive of them as costs. I'm arguing that we should flip that relationship, that a new type of paradigm generates a different normative as well as environment that flips that relationship where money going towards people are thought of as investments in their capacities. Then, you know, I guess, again, honing in on this question of affordability. With sovereign monetary power at the United States, with the capacities to be able to generate and direct resources, the limits to our ability to do so is productivity itself. So inflation comes into play when our resources are expended in such a way that we are at full employment. We are at a distribution where our resources are fully employed. After that point, injection of resources into the system, that leads to inflation. I dare say we are far away from that point.
No, I've got a different question about affordability. Since you use that word, I'm going to pick up on that. I got a question about affordability, particularly as it relates to Black Americans, that I want to pose when we come forward. You're listening to Darrick Hamilton, Director of the Institute for the Study of Race, Stratification, and Political Economy at the New School, and also Chief Economist for the AFL-CIO, right now on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply stop, opt out. Consult a doctor prior to use.
Wow, you look amazing. What have you been doing?
I'm sure you've heard of Ozempic, Wegovy, and the other GLP-1 medications, right? Well, I found this great company called Zelfie. If you qualify, their providers can prescribe medications like Ozempic and Wegovy and other GLP-1 medications that are 80 to 90% less expensive, all 100% online.
I can get GLP-1 medications for 80 to 90% less and do it all online? No doctor's office or pharmacy?
Yes, Zelfie can provide semaglutide or tirzepatide, the active ingredients in Ozempic and other expensive GLP-1s, but for 80 to 90% less and shipped directly to your door.
How do I get started with Zelfie?
Just send them a text.
Text SKINNY to 323232 to get started today with Zelfie. Get the same active ingredients in Wegovy or Ozempic, but for 80 to 90% less and 100% online. Don't wait. Text SKINNY to 323232 right now for a link to your exclusive offer. Text SKINNY to 323232. That's SKINNY to 323232. SKINNY to 323232.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your Senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
You really about to do it?
40 acres and a mule. This is bigger than the music.
You really about to do it?
Yeah, they tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence.
Who among us doesn't like black music? But Kendrick is right. This moment is so much bigger than music. These are serious times. We've got serious problems, and we need serious people who understand that slogans are not solutions. When you want substantial and sober analysis about things that matter to you and the ones you love, this is where you turn. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black.
Ready to order?
Yes. We're earning unlimited 3% cash back on dining and entertainment with the Capital One Saver Card, so let's just get one of everything.
Everything?
Fire everything. The Capital One Saver Card is at table 27, and they're earning unlimited 3% cash back.
Yes, Chef! This is so nice.
Had a feeling you'd want 3% cash back on dessert.
Ooh, tiramisu.
Earn unlimited 3% cash back on dining and entertainment with the Capital One Saver Card. Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Sometimes he fails at fitting in, but we're okay with that. You're inside the Tavis Smiley Show.
You are indeed with Darrick Hamilton, director of the Institute for the Study of Race, Stratification, and Political Economy at the New School. As I mentioned earlier, he also happens to be the chief economist for the AFL-CIO. Delighted to have him on this program in this hour. You mentioned the word affordability a moment ago, and I want to just kind of weave two things together if I can. I was reading a piece last night in preparation for today's program about the fact that black Americans, no surprise here, in many respects have suffered the most during the first 100 days of this new administration. The administration has eliminated or defamed offices and programs intended, as we all know, to address historical inequities facing and impacting our community, from the Office of Civil Rights within the Environmental Protection Agency to the Minority Business Development Agency, et cetera, et cetera. I could do this all day long if I had the time, but black folk have taken it on the chin in these first 100 days, I think perhaps more than anybody else, say nothing of all the federal layoffs that you mentioned earlier, Darrick, that disproportionately impact African Americans. All of that leads to an affordability question for us that is uniquely different than for everybody else. We know that the black middle class in large measure exists because of federal work down through the years. So what say you about affordability and black folk in particular in the days ahead?
And, you know, this is an old story. It's always been the case that black people are the first fired, last hired as the country goes into contraction.
Mm-hmm.
It has been the case that Trump is targeting middle-class jobs. And then, Tavis, if I may, just one slight, from my view, correction.
Sure.
When it comes to wealth, there's never been a black middle class, and that speaks to the point of affordability.
I take your point.
We don't have a great deal of wealth to even absorb these job losses and downturns. So it is a peculiar vulnerability for the black population. But, you know, let's not be all dismal. To some extent, these are choices. These are policy choices that can be corrected.
Mm-hmm.
So just bringing back to where we began in paradigm change, ultimately we need to advocate for paradigm change that does not continue to leave black people peculiarly vulnerable to these whims.
Yeah, it's a sobering point. I was just pausing because I take your point about the fact that we've never really had a black middle class. And I guess when I use that term in the future, I'll put it in air quotes since this is radio. But I do, in fact, take your point that we really have never had a black middle class if you look at the numbers and break them down in the way that Darrick Hamilton has in this hour. Our remaining moments with him when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. Think about your mentors and idols, the people who inspire you the most. While it may look like they have all the answers, they don't. But they do know when to ask questions and seek the support they need. In a world that glorifies hyper-independence, it's easy to forget that we're all better with a support system. Therapy is a great way to find a consistent source of support in your life, so you can break free from the outdated belief that seeking help is a sign of weakness. BetterHelp has experienced therapists ready to help you with challenges ranging from anxiety and depression to relationships and stress. It's convenient, too. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. You can even send your therapist a message anytime something comes up. Build your support system with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/ABCRadio today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/ABCRadio.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found BenefitsCheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. BenefitsCheckup.org.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more, all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada, member FDIC.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality healthcare, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
And the top-rated African-American talk show host in the nation, according to Talkers Magazine. You're tapped in with Tavis Smiley right now.
I've got 3 minutes left here with Darrick Hamilton. Darrick, I've said for many, many years now that as goes Black America, so goes the nation. That's my read. I've said for many, many years now that when you make Black America better, you make all of America better. I stand by those principles. Dr. King put it this way, that our role has always been to redeem the soul of America. That's King, to redeem the soul of America. But anyway you look at it, whenever things have sort of hit a chord for us as Black folk, we've been able historically to mobilize and organize the conscience of the entire country. At our best, we have always been the conscience of this country. In a moment, a peculiar moment like this, what say you about whether or not that reality will hold true in the days, months, and years ahead?
Yeah, can't deny that history, Tavis. I hope it spills over to all and many groups. And again, we need a coalition with affirmative inclusion in a multidimensional way to ultimately defang fascism of its power. And again, the antidote is solidarity.
Solidarity is an easy word to say. Far more difficult to achieve. You used it 2 or 3 times by my count in this conversation. How do we get to solidarity?
With intentionality. Again, I also prefaced it with the word affirmative inclusion. That means some intentionality in the design, management, and implementation that ensures Black people are included, that ensures groups that are marginal in our society are intentionally included. If left without the intentionality, we know what America does. It excludes, it consolidates, and it generates inequality. So you need that intentionality.
Yeah. I received that. Again, a lot easier said than done, but I take your point and don't disagree with it at all. Darrick Hamilton is director of the Institute for the Study of Race, Stratification, and Political Economy at the New School. He is also the chief economist for the AFL-CIO. Who better to have had on in this hour, trying to figure out, speaking of King, where we go from here. Where do we go from here? That's the Kingian question. And I think we've tried to the best of our ability to address at least part of that question in this hour. Darrick, good to have you on. Thank you for your insights, and look forward to doing it somewhere down the road.
It's always a proud honor to be on your show. I appreciate all that you do. And again, I'm glad you referenced King, because frankly, he had the vision with his freedom budget as a mechanism for a new North Star of justice.
No, I think you're right. I've said many times, and I believe this again with every fiber of my being, that the future and the destiny of this country is inextricably tied to how seriously we take the legacy of Dr. King. What is that legacy? Glad you asked. Justice for all, service to others, and a love that liberates people. That's King's legacy at its best. Justice for all, service to others, and a love that liberates people. And I do believe that the future, the destiny of this country, if there is one, is inextricably linked to how seriously we take the legacy of MLK. I will leave it there for right now. Darrick, good to have you on. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, sir.
When we come forward, and I found out today, this is, believe it or not, the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. Speaking of King, I could give a whole speech about that. I've written a book about that. King and his Beyond Vietnam speech at the Riverside Church in Manhattan that put a target on his back. He gave the speech April 4, 67. They killed him a year to the day later, April 4, 68. Well, believe it or not, once again, today is the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. We'll talk about that with two amazing guests in our next hour. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. Interest in becoming an NYPD officer surged 45% after eligibility requirements were loosened in February. Mayor Adams announced the NYPD is on track to reach 35,000 members by fall 2026. The U.S. is prosecuting people with violations of security regulations for entering the